Hey everybody. It occurs to me that I started this entire 2020 D2R2 project about my preparation, both in gear and training and all the rest, in getting ready for this year's D2R2 to have D2R2 canceled. Rightfully, I will add, they made the right decision there. But I hadn't done any sort of wrap up or conclusion. I hadn't put a period at the end of the sentence. And one could argue that that project will now extend probably into next year, and that therefore, it doesn't need a period at the end of the sentence. But let's be honest, next year's a new sentence. So we'll put a period on it. Things I learned, realized, did, should have done, shouldn't have done. Let's run through them. One, I live someplace, locally speaking, that's really, really flat. I moved here, I moved to this part of the state effectively probably like 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And though it is only probably 20 or 30 miles from where I used to live, it is a lot flatter here than where I used to live. It's much more difficult to find meaningful elevation change here. I used to have climbing loops where I previously lived, and I could put on quite a bit of altitude in a single loop. And here, that is not really the case. So I need to find the local climbing spots. I need to find the elevation changes. I need to accept that I might need to go to them instead of having a convenient local loop with lots of hills on it. And that's okay. And I think my training for this year was probably I was probably on track mileage-wise to be completely comfortable for the number of miles that we were talking about. I mean, realize I had signed up for the 100K option, so 62 miles, and yes, on gravel mostly, and all the rest. But like that's not an alarming amount of mileage for me. And I think I was very comfortably on track to be able to handle that sort of mileage with no real difficulties at all. I am pretty sure I was not on track to be able to handle the altitude. The loop that I was scheduled to do, I think normally clocks in at like 7,500 vertical feet of climbing. And I know some of you, people that are like doing Everests and all the rest, and that's fine, that's okay. But like, I'm a 40-odd-year-old father of 3 who took like 7 years off from riding and got fat. Like I'm not that guy. So I need to spend time working on climbing meaningful amounts. I would also like to stretch out the mileage that I'm doing a bit more. But really, for me, mileage comes down to time. And it's time away from family, and it's time away from job, and it's time away from a bunch of other responsibilities that I have. So I don't get to devote often 3, 4, 5 hours to bike rides on a given day because I've got other stuff that needs to get done. And I'm going to have to figure out how to fit that stuff into my life for next year. So climbing and longer rides, fine. And training wise, I think that was pretty much where I was at. I was pretty happy with that. For navigation, I think I have a solution right now that mounts a phone on a essentially like a Wahoo mount or a Garmin mount or whatever off the front of the bike, and that's okay. But there are like battery life problems that are endemic with that. Phones will do all of that stuff, but they don't have the battery life that some of those dedicated systems have. And on my normal loops at an hour or 3 or whatever, that's not like a huge problem for me. But for something like D2R2, that's gonna take me realistically like 8 or 10 hours probably. I'm gonna need to at least consider getting a Wahoo or getting a Garmin or whatever it is. It's like a dedicated system for that. So that's an expense and that's a thing to consider, but it's okay. Or I'm gonna have to figure out another phone solution than what I've got. Up to it, including I've been thinking recently about Bluetooth earbuds, and I hate riding with headphones in. I've never liked it, and I'm not one of those people, by the way, that blast their music from a speaker or their phone while they ride, because I don't need other people hearing my jams. Like, they don't need to hear that. I don't need to hear theirs. Like, it's, quiet time. But I have been thinking recently about some of the new school Bluetooth headphones, like earbuds, and the possibility of running my phone basically in like everything off mode, right? Except for turn-by-turn instructions, and just sort of leaving the phone in a jersey pocket with one earbud in, just to sort of have it whisper in my ear when to take turns and what to do. Research is warranted, but an interesting possibility perhaps. And because then my handlebars don't have to be cluttered with anything. Then I know where all the turns are with no visual display, and that's kind of nice. Anyway, as far as gear, my gravel bike is working really well right now. It is, the handlebars are in a really lovely spot, height-wise, width-wise, reach-wise. It's very comfortable. I finally just got a new headset, a non-ruined headset pressed into that frame. And so now the bike actually steers properly and corners properly, and I can ride it no hands, which I know seems like just like a party trick for a lot of people, but it's really, really, really useful to be able to pull a layer off, or dig something out of your jersey pocket, or sit up and take a really big drink of water, or eat a sandwich, or whatever while you're riding. And so it's nice to be able to get a break, to stretch your back out sometimes just by being able to sit up no hands. And I couldn't do that previously, and so it's much more comfortable now. So that part, the bike is rolling really, really, really nicely right now. The brakes still squeak like stuck pigs, but I'll deal with that as it goes. The only concern I had, so I had no concerns really about that bike putting up with that length ride. I figure the frame is 25 years old, and if it was going to break, it probably would have broken. And it would have broken, I imagine, on some of the stupider things I've done over the years. And riding on gravel seems unlikely to kill it at this point. So I was pretty happy with that. And the componentry is all good quality, vintage, but the good stuff, right? It's Dura-Ace and XTR. And these are things that are like solid and durable and have been well maintained on top of it all. The only thing that is that remains a question for me is if the low gear on that bike was sufficiently low. So D2R2 says they recommend a minimum of a 1-to-1 low gear ratio of chainring to cog size, yeah? And I have on that bike right now a 32-tooth inner front chainring and a 32-tooth large cog on the back. So I have a 1-to-1 ratio, and that bike is on 26-inch wheels. So that's a lower 1-to-1 than on a 700C bike, right? Or 650B bike. But I'm a bit of a chonky boy these days, and so I need to recognize that my climbing prowess is not what it once was. It's been difficult for me to train hills based on the aforementioned lack of hills in my area. And like some of the grades that are posted on that are like up in the 20% range, which is real steep. And while I can grunt up stuff like that, if we're talking protracted climbing at that sort of grade, I'm gonna need some bailout gears. And based on the stuff on that bike, I didn't have a ton of options about how to go about doing that. I couldn't really go with a smaller inner front chainring because of the bolt spider on the chainring, on the crank. It's difficult to get an 8-speed cog stack with more than 32 teeth. And if you do find one, because I think like Sunrace and some people make them, the XTR derailleur in the back, I think only maybe handles up to like a 34 on the books. Maybe you could stretch that up a little bit. And I think to really get a meaningfully lower gear, I was going to have to go with like a 34-tooth cog in the back and try to find a way to get like a 30-tooth inner chainring in the front, which is like what a lot of compact modern cranksets are running. And I was sort of struggling with that. I have just realized recently that I actually have a crankset and bottom bracket in my parts bins that will do that. And while I don't own a 32-tooth chainring, or a 30-tooth chainring for it, I'm sure I could get one. And that might be made to work. It's not the lightest crankset ever, but it won't ever break. So, yeah, something to think about. Anyway, gear-wise, yeah, I was pretty happy with all of that. The only other thing I was thinking about was I had been vacillating between a handlebar bag for carrying snacks and nutrition and goodies, or a small frame bag, or jersey pockets for that. And there are aid stations along the way, so I don't need to carry a ton of food, but I do not want to put myself in a position, I didn't want to put myself in a position of bonking, because I wasn't eating enough or drinking enough or whatever. So I had settled on jersey pockets for this year, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And, it's interesting, like, the more people that I watch, I'm talking about, like, I've been watching a lot of, was it Lachlan from EF Education, doing some of his rides, which are just amazing to watch, and he makes cycling a better place. I've been watching some of Decline stuff. I've been watching, like, a lot of people that are off sort of doing some of these things, and they're riding handlebar bags. And I'm thinking, if jersey pockets were a good idea, they would have been running jersey pockets, and they're not. So maybe I need to rethink that strategy. But good news, I've got another year to reconsider all of this and to get my training in order and all of the rest. So that's what I'm going to do. In the meantime, thanks for watching these guys, watching these ridiculous videos of a middle-aged man trying to get ready to do something kind of dumb, and then getting bailed out by a global pandemic that's killed 125,000 people in the US so far. So great job on that. And yeah, back to your normal programming soon.